My fiancé stole my credit card 2 weeks before our wedding so he could take his mistress on our honeymoon trip. I went nuclear when I found out, but his family started threatening me to back down and drop the charges. So I did the only thing I could think of, and took my revenge way too far. We had our perfect venue booked with only the very last of the deposit left to pay. But with just 2 weeks until the wedding, my fiancé Mason came to me asking me for the biggest favor ever. We had been together for 5 years up until that point, and although we loved each other deeply, I recently realized there was one thing Mason loved more than even me, and that was money and luxury. Despite coming from an affluent family, he rarely ever spent as much as a dime on anything himself. And so, when he asked if he could borrow my credit card for just a minute, I gave it to him without hesitation, assuming it was just for a takeout order. I even saw him and his brother Ian in our living room minutes later inputting my credit card onto their phones. I still didn't think anything of it, and given that 20 minutes later my favorite Thai spot showed up at our place, I had no reason to be suspicious. But then 3 days later, I called up the wedding venue to pay off the last couple $100s on the deposit, and that's where everything started going wrong. They told me my card had declined. I told them that was not possible. I had about $15,000 in there just a few days ago. I asked them to try again, and when they did, my card declined again. I remember my stomaching just dropping and my hands trembling, and I instantly rushed over to check my bank account like a madwoman. I opened up my account and saw the $30 remaining. My face went white, and I grabbed the phone to call my bank. My hands were shaking so bad I had to dial the number 3 times just to get it right, and when I finally connected with the customer service lady, I explained everything. Well, that's when she dropped a bomb on me. A few days ago, my card had been used to book multiple week-long stays at luxury resorts on the opposite side of the world. The thing was, I had already paid for Mason and I's honeymoon, and he knew Dubai gave me heat strokes, so it couldn't have been him. At least that's what I thought. I asked the lady when exactly these transactions were made, and what she told me made me damn near pass out on the spot. The date and time matched exactly with when Mason and Ian took my card. I proceeded to hang up the phone and just sat down on the couch. I was still in my denial phase at this point, so I logged onto my phone and started searching for hardcore evidence. And what I found somehow made it even worse. Turns out not only had Mason and Ian spent my entire bank account on a vacation for them in Dubai, but they had also paid for their mistresses to come join them there. The minute I saw this, I went into hyperventilation mode. I began experiencing an extreme panic attack and just ran to the bathroom to puke my guts out. I retched for what must have been 30 minutes and cried horse tears the entire time. I was completely broken. And guess what? Mason and his brother just happened to come home while I was in the bathroom. To add insult to injury, I know Mason saw me doubled over near the toilet, and I heard Ian sarcastically ask him if he would go help me out. His response? I'd rather do anything than help that bimbo. He muttered quietly under his breath. Those words were the nail in the coffin. They were the final punch to the gut I needed, because from that moment on, all I felt was rage. Mason thought I couldn't hear him. He thought I was just his dumb loving bimbo wife who paid for everything. But what he didn't know was that despite everything, I held all the cards. I walked out of that bathroom and out of the house with my head held high, my goal clear as ever. My first stop was the bank. I needed physical records of all those transactions. I stood in line trying to keep my composure, probably looking like a complete mess with my puffy eyes and disheveled hair. The teller looked concerned when I approached. I explained my situation as calmly as possible, but my voice kept cracking. She immediately called over the manager. They took me to a private room where I showed my ID and requested detailed transaction records. The manager, Sarah, typed away on her computer and printed out everything I needed. The paper trail was damning. Multiple luxury hotel bookings in Dubai, first-class plane tickets, even some high-end restaurant reservations, all made within minutes of each other on the exact day Mason had my card. Sarah looked at me with sympathy and suggested I file a fraud claim. I explained these were authorized transactions technically since I'd handed over my card. She nodded understandingly and instead helped me freeze my accounts to prevent any further damage. My next stop was my friend Jenna's apartment. I needed somewhere to stay, and Jenna had always been my rock. I called her from the bank. Parking lot, barely able to speak through my tears. She immediately told me to come over. 20 minutes later, I was sitting on her couch with a glass of wine in my hand, going through the bank statements line by line. Jenna was furious. She wanted to drive to my house and confront Mason right then and there. I stopped her. This required strategy, not emotion. I opened my laptop and searched for a lawyer specializing in financial fraud cases. I found one with great reviews named Robert Mendelson and called his office right away. His receptionist squeezed me in for a consultation the very next morning. I spent the night tossing and turning on Jenna's couch, plotting my next moves. The morning came quickly, and I arrived at Robert's office clutching my folder of evidence. Robert was a stern-looking man in his 50s with reading glasses perched on his nose. I laid out everything: the bank statements, the dates, the timing, even screenshots I'd taken from Ian's Instagram showing him and Mason outside one of the Dubai hotels they'd booked with my money. Robert listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. He explained that since Mason had my permission to use the card initially, this was a complicated case. But the fact that they'd used it for personal expenses, especially of this magnitude, without my knowledge or consent could constitute fraud. He agreed to take my case and outlined our first steps. I needed to file a police report immediately. Robert made a call to a detective he knew at the local precinct and arranged for me to meet with her that afternoon. Detective Garcia was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes that didn't miss a thing. She took my statement and copies of all my evidence. She asked if Mason had ever done anything like this before. I thought hard and remembered smaller discrepancies I'd noticed over the years, but had brushed off. Times when bills seemed higher than they should have been. Instances where money seemed to disappear from our joint account. I'd always attributed it to my bad math or forgetfulness. Now I wasn't so sure. Detective Garcia nodded knowingly. This was a pattern, not an isolated incident. She warned me that these cases could take time, but she would do her best to build a solid case. As I left the police station, my phone exploded with notifications. Mason had finally realized I was gone. His messages started with casual questions about my whereabouts, then escalated to angry demands about where I was. I ignored them all. Instead, I called the wedding venue to explain the situation. The manager, Tim, was incredibly understanding. He couldn't refund the non-refundable deposit, but but he offered to reschedule our date for free if I ever wanted to use their services in the future. I thanked him and hung up, knowing I'd never be marrying Mason. Next, I called my parents. This was the hardest call to make. My mom answered, excited to discuss wedding details. I broke down the moment I heard her voice. Through sobs, I explained everything that had happened. She was silent for a long moment before telling me they were catching the next flight to be with me. I protested weakly, but secretly felt relieved. I needed my family now more than ever. I spent the rest of the day making calls to our other vendors, to friends who were supposed to be in the wedding party, to my boss explaining why I needed emergency time off. Everyone was shocked but supportive. Mason's calls and texts continued nonstop. Around 7 p.m., he showed up at Jenna's apartment. We knew he would eventually figure out where I was. Jenna and I watched through the peephole as he pounded on the door, alternating between angry demands and pathetic pleas. We stayed completely silent until he finally gave up and left. 10 minutes later, his brother Ian arrived and tried the same tactics. When that failed, he started threatening to call the police and report her for kidnapping me. Jenna nearly opened the door to confront him, but I held her back. Instead, she called the police herself and reported him for harassment. A patrol car arrived within minutes, and we watched from the window as Ian was warned to leave the premises. The officer knocked on Jenna's door afterward to check if we were okay. I briefly explained the situation, and he advised me to consider getting a restraining order. The next day was a blur of activity. My parents arrived and booked a hotel room nearby. Robert called with updates on our case. The detective had already interviewed the bank staff and was building a file. I met with a counselor specializing in financial abuse cases who helped me understand that what had happened wasn't my fault. Around noon, I received an email from Mason. The subject line read, "Explanation." I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a long, rambling message about how he and Ian had been planning this trip for months, how they deserved a proper brother's getaway before the wedding tied him down, how I was overreacting to what was essentially just a loan. He promised to pay me back eventually, and couldn't understand why I was making such a big deal of this. The email confirmed everything I needed to know. He felt entitled to my money and saw nothing wrong with what he'd done. I forwarded the email straight to Robert and Detective Garcia. By the end of the week, Mason was facing criminal charges for fraud. The investigation revealed this wasn't the first time he and Ian had pulled something like this. Two of Mason's ex-girlfriends came forward with similar stories once news of the case got out. One had lost nearly $20,000 to them through a similar scheme. Mason's parents immediately hired an expensive attorney. They also started a smear campaign against me, telling anyone who would listen that I was a gold digger who had consented to the purchases and was now vindictively trying to ruin their son's life. Some mutual friends believed them. I lost people I thought would stand by me. The case dragged on for months. Discovery revealed text messages between Mason and Ian planning the whole thing, joking about how easy it was to manipulate me. There were also messages to two women they had apparently been seeing behind my back, inviting them to join them in Dubai. The women were located and interviewed, confirming they had indeed met up with Mason and Ian in Dubai, all expenses paid with my money. 6 months after what should have been our wedding day, Mason took a plea deal. He would serve 18 months in prison, pay full restitution, and be on probation for 3 years after his release. Ian received a similar sentence. The judge made it clear during sentencing that their actions constituted a serious breach of trust and financial abuse. I sat in the courtroom as the sentence was read, making eye contact with Mason for the first time since that day. He looked away first. As part of the settlement, I received all of my money back plus additional damages. Mason's parents were forced to sell their vacation home to cover the costs when Mason's own accounts came up short. I used some of the money to start a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse navigate the legal system and rebuild their lives. 3 years later, my organization has helped hundreds of people escape financially abusive relationships. I've spoken at conferences across the country, sharing my story and advocating for stronger legal protections. I've also found love again with Keith, a financial advisor I met through my nonprofit work. He's shown me what a healthy financial partnership looks like, with complete transparency and mutual respect. Mason was released from prison last year. I heard through mutual friends that he's working at his uncle's car dealership, the only family member who would still employ him. Ian moved across the country after his release, trying to escape his tarnished reputation. Sometimes I think about the wedding that never happened, the years I spent with someone who valued money over love, the dreams we had that turned out to be built on lies. But then I look at my life now, the meaningful work I do, the healthy relationship I've built, the financial independence I've reclaimed, and I know that walking out that bathroom door with my head held high was the best decision I ever made. The recovery wasn't easy. The first few weeks after discovering Mason's betrayal were some of the darkest of my life. I barely ate or slept, constantly replaying every moment of our relationship in my head, looking for signs I had missed. Detective Garcia connected me with a support group for victims of financial abuse. The first meeting I attended, I could barely speak through my tears, but listening to other survivors' stories helped me realize I wasn't alone. Many had experienced similar betrayals from people they trusted completely. Some had lost far more than I had: retirement savings, homes, even custody of their children due to financial manipulation. Their resilience inspired me. By the third meeting, I was able to share my full story. After each session, I felt a little stronger, a little more certain that I would get through this. My parents stayed in town for 2 weeks, helping me move my belongings out of the house I had shared with Mason. We went when we knew he would be at work. His parents showed up halfway through our moving process, threatening to call the police for trespassing. My dad, usually the calmest person I know, got right in their faces and told them exactly what he thought of them and their son. The police did eventually show up, called by Mason's mother, but they quickly confirmed I had every right to retrieve my own belongings. The officers even helped us carry some boxes to the moving truck, clearly unimpressed by Mason's parents' behavior. Finding a new place to live was challenging with a wedding to cancel and legal proceedings to manage. I ended up renting a small studio apartment. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. The first night there, surrounded by boxes and with just a mattress on the floor, I cried myself to sleep. Not because I missed Mason, but because I was mourning the future I thought I would have. The dreams that had been shattered, the trust that had been broken. Robert proved to be an exceptional attorney. He was methodical and relentless, leaving no stone unturned in building our case. He subpoenaed Mason and Ian's phone records, bank statements, and social media accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. Text messages revealed they had been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity to get access to my card. Photos showed them living it up in Dubai with my money, popping champagne on a yacht I had paid for, dining in restaurants where a single meal cost more than I made in a day. The most painful discovery was an exchange between Mason and than one of the women they had invited along. She had asked if he was really getting married in 2 weeks. His response, "Don't worry about that. It's just for my parents. Won't last long." Reading those words felt like being stabbed. All those years, all those memories, all those promises, meaningless to him. As the case progressed, I threw myself into work. My boss had been incredibly understanding, allowing me flexible hours to attend legal meetings and therapy sessions. My colleagues rallied around me, bringing me lunch when I forgot to eat, listening when I needed to vent, covering for me when I had bad days. One particularly rough day, after a grueling deposition where Mason's attorney had tried to paint me as financially irresponsible, I returned to the office to find my desk covered in small gifts. Chocolates, a plant, a funny card signed by everyone. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. Social media became both a blessing and a curse during this time. A blessing because it provided evidence. Ian had been stupid enough to post photos of their Dubai trip in real time, tagging their location at hotels and restaurants that matched my bank statements exactly. A curse because Mason's family used their platforms to portray me as a vindictive ex making false accusations. I had to block them all eventually, unable to bear seeing their lies spread. Some mutual friends chose sides, and not always mine. People I had known for years, people who were supposed to be in our wedding party, believed Mason's story that I had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. Others stood firmly by me, cutting ties with Mason and his family completely. The divisions were painful but clarifying, showing me who my true friends were. The district attorney decided to prosecute the case personally after reviewing the evidence. She told me it was one of the most clear-cut cases of financial exploitation she had seen, and she wanted to make an example of them. The press got wind of the case, and suddenly my private pain was public knowledge. Local news ran stories with headlines like "Dream Wedding Turns to Nightmare, Bride Savings Stolen for Dubai Getaway." I declined all interview requests, wanting to maintain what privacy I could. The weight of it all sometimes felt crushing. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days where the simplest tasks seemed impossible. My therapist diagnosed me with situational depression and recommended medication to help me through the worst of it. I was resistant at first, seeing it as a sign of weakness, but eventually agreed. The medication helped take the edge off, allowing me to function day to day while I processed everything that had happened. The trial date was set for 8 months after the incident. As it approached, Mason's attorney reached out with a plea offer. They wanted to avoid the spectacle of a public trial. The terms were reasonable: full restitution plus damages, jail time, probation. After discussing it with Robert and the DA, I agreed. Part of me wanted the satisfaction of seeing Mason convicted by a jury, but another part just wanted it over with. The plea hearing was scheduled for what would have been our first anniversary. I chose a strong outfit for court that day, a tailored black suit that made me feel powerful and in control. Mason appeared in a suit as well, but he looked diminished somehow, thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes. Our eyes met briefly as he entered the courtroom. He quickly looked away. The judge was a stern older woman who made it clear she took financial crimes seriously. When it came time for victim impact statements, I stood at the podium with shaking hands but a steady voice. I spoke about trust and betrayal, about the emotional damage that went far beyond the financial loss. I spoke about how Mason's actions had affected not just our relationship, but my ability to trust anyone. I spoke about the wedding that never happened, the future that was stolen from me. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge thanked me for my statement and turned to Mason. He offered a brief, rehearsed apology that sounded hollow to my ears. The judge wasn't impressed either. She imposed the maximum sentence allowed under the plea agreement and added additional community service hours. She specifically ordered that his community service be performed at a women's shelter that helped victims of financial abuse. As Mason was led away in handcuffs, I felt no satisfaction, no vindication, just a profound sadness for everything that had been lost. Outside the courthouse, I made a brief statement to the press. I didn't vilify Mason or seek sympathy. Instead, I focused on raising awareness about financial abuse in relationships and the importance of maintaining financial independence, even when sharing a life with someone. The story made national news briefly. I received hundreds of messages from people who had experienced similar betrayals. Their stories touched me deeply and sparked an idea. With part of my settlement money, I started the Financial Freedom Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse rebuild their lives. We provided legal guidance, financial counseling, and emotional support. We also worked with legislators to strengthen laws protecting victims of financial exploitation. The foundation grew quickly, tapping into an unfortunately large need. Within a year, we had helped over 100 people escape financially abusive relationships and recover damages. We partnered with banks to develop better fraud protection measures and warning systems for unusual spending patterns. We created educational programs for high schools and colleges about financial literacy and the warning signs of financial abuse. The work was healing for me. Each person we helped made my own experience seem more meaningful, as if some good had come from it after all. Through the foundation, I met Keith. He volunteered his services as a financial advisor, helping our clients rebuild their credit and create sustainable budgets. We worked closely together for months before he finally asked me out. I hesitated, still wary of relationships, still healing from my experience with Mason. Keith was patient, understanding my caution. We started as friends, getting to know each other slowly. He was transparent about his own finances from the beginning, showing me statements and discussing his approach to money management. It was refreshing after the secrecy and manipulation I had experienced with Mason. 6 months into dating, Keith proposed a joint project rather than a joint account. We would each contribute to a shared investment in a rental property, with everything clearly documented and agreed upon in writing. It was unromantic perhaps, but exactly what I needed to rebuild my trust. The property turned out to be a good investment, and more importantly, it showed me that financial partnership could be healthy and equal. On our 1-year anniversary, Keith proposed. The ring was modest but meaningful, designed with input from my closest friends to ensure it was something I would love. He had saved for it specifically, showing me the dedicated account he had created for this purpose. I said yes, but with one condition: a prenuptial agreement that protected both of us. He agreed without hesitation. Our wedding was small and intimate, nothing like the elaborate celebration I had planned with Mason. We held it at a local botanical garden with just 50 guests, only the people who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes, whispering that he was proud of me for finding happiness again. The week before the wedding, I received a letter from Mason. He was still in prison but eligible for early release soon. The letter was long and seemed genuinely remorseful. He explained how prison had forced him to confront his materialism and dishonesty. He didn't ask for forgiveness, but wanted me to know he regretted his actions deeply. I read the letter once, then filed it away. His His journey was no longer my concern. My focus was on my future with Keith, on the foundation's work, on the life I had rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Mason and Ian were released after serving 14 months of their 18-month sentences. Mason attempted to contact me again through mutual friends, but I maintained my boundaries. Ian moved to Arizona to start over, apparently humbled by the experience. Their parents never apologized or acknowledged their son's wrongdoing. Last I heard, they had relocated to Florida, distancing themselves from the scandal. Keith and I have been married for 2 years now. We recently bought our first home together, a modest but beautiful house with a garden where I grow vegetables and flowers. We maintain separate accounts as well as a joint one for household expenses. Financial discussions are open and regular in our relationship. Nothing is hidden, nothing is assumed. The foundation continues to grow. We now have offices in 3 cities and a staff of dedicated professionals. We've helped draft legislation that has been adopted in several states, creating stronger protections for victims of financial abuse. I still share my story at conferences and seminars, no longer embarrassed by my past naivety, but proud of my resilience. Sometimes, when I look back on that day, standing in the bathroom, hearing Mason call me a bimbo, discovering the full extent of his betrayal, I'm amazed at how far I've come. That moment could have broken me permanently. Instead, it became the catalyst for creating a life more authentic and fulfilling than anything I had imagined before. I walked out of that bathroom with my head held high, my goal clear as ever, to reclaim my power, my money, and my future. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, but I did it. And in doing so, I found not just justice, but something even more valuable, a sense of purpose that transcended my own experience, using my pain to help others find their way back to solid ground. That's a wedding gift Mason never intended to give me, but one I treasure above all others. That first step was just the beginning of a wild 5-year journey. I started by finding a cheap studio apartment 40 minutes from the city. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and enough space for a bed and desk. The landlord didn't ask questions when I paid 3 months up front with cash from my emergency fund. I bought a used laptop from a pawn shop the same day. The thing barely ran, but it connected to the internet, and that's all I needed. I sent emails to 3 old college friends that night, explaining my situation without the messy details. 2 responded within hours. One offered me a temporary job at her marketing firm. I accepted immediately. The pay was barely above minimum wage. I didn't care. It was income, it was legitimate, and it gave me structure while I plotted my next moves. I woke up at 5 each morning to document everything I could remember about Mason's business practices. Every conversation, every shady deal, every questionable transaction. My notes filled 17-word documents that first week. I organized them meticulously by date, business entity, and potential legal violation. The pattern became clear quickly. Mason had been running sophisticated fraud schemes for years. I had unwittingly signed papers that implicated me in some of them. This realization hit me like a truck on my 8th day of freedom. I threw up in my kitchen sink. Then I wiped my mouth and kept writing. I needed evidence beyond my word against his. I reached out to an old classmate who had become a forensic accountant. We met for coffee near her office. She listened without judgment as I outlined the situation. Her advice was simple but crucial. Document everything. Find paper trails. Identify witnesses. She recommended a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud cases. The lawyer's consultation fee was steep. I paid it with my second paycheck from the marketing job. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. She asked tough questions I wasn't prepared to answer. I left with homework and a growing understanding of the battle ahead. I spent my nights digging through old emails and documents I'd saved without realizing their importance. I found bank statements showing unusual transfers. Tax documents with discrepancies jumped out at me now. Photos from company events showed key people Mason had claimed never to have met. I built my case piece by piece like assembling a massive jigsaw puzzle. The lawyer was impressed with my evidence collection. She took my case on contingency after our 3rd meeting. This small victory gave me my first real night of sleep in weeks. I celebrated by buying real groceries instead of ramen. The legal process moved painfully slow. Depositions and discovery requests dragged on for months. Mason's legal team fought us at every turn with delay tactics. They offered a settlement after 6 months. The amount seemed huge at first glance. My lawyer advised against accepting it. The number represented pennies on the dollar of what was actually stolen. We pushed forward. I kept working my marketing job during the day. The routine helped keep me sane. My boss noticed my dedication and gave me a small promotion. I used the extra income to move to a slightly better apartment. This one had windows that actually opened fully. I bought a proper desk at a thrift store. My lawyer called with breakthrough news in month 8. A former employee of Mason's had come forward with corroborating evidence. The documents matched mine perfectly and added crucial details I hadn't been privy to. The case suddenly had real momentum. Mason's legal team requested a meeting. Their new settlement offer was 4 times the original. My lawyer smiled for the first time since I'd met her. We countered at 6 times the amount. The negotiations were brutal. I sat through 14 hours of meetings over 3 days. I didn't speak much. My evidence spoke for me. We settled at 5 times the original offer plus legal fees. The terms included a non-disclosure agreement about the settlement amount, but not about the fraud itself. I signed the papers with a steady hand. The money hit my account a week later. I paid off my student loans the same day. The feeling was indescribable. I bought a bottle of champagne but couldn't bring myself to open it. Victory felt hollow somehow. I needed more than just my own justice. I started researching similar fraud cases while working my now full-time marketing position. Patterns emerged quickly. Dozens of people in situations like mine had no idea how to fight back. I created a simple website offering resources and basic guidance. The site cost me $300 to build. I worked on it nights and weekends for a month. The first email from a victim came just 2 days after launch. A woman in Arizona described a scenario eerily similar to mine. I spent 3 hours writing a detailed response with resource links. She wrote back a week later saying she'd found a lawyer using my guidelines. Her case was moving forward. 3 more emails arrived the following week, then 7 the week after. I realized I had found my purpose. I used a portion of my settlement to formally establish a nonprofit organization. The paperwork was daunting, but nowhere near as complex as the legal battle I'd just survived. I named it Phoenix Financial Recovery Network. The logo was simple, a rising bird made of numbers. I hired a part-time assistant to help manage the growing number of inquiries. Maria had escaped financial abuse herself. She understood our mission on a cellular level. The organization grew steadily over the next 2 years. We partnered with law firms willing to take cases on contingency. We created step-by-step guides for documenting financial crimes. We built a network of forensic accountants who offered reduced rates to our clients. I quit my marketing job in the 3rd year to run PFRN full-time. The decision was terrifying but necessary. quickly. Our caseload had tripled. We couldn't keep up with part-time effort anymore. I took a modest salary from the organization, just enough to cover my expenses and save a small amount each month. The work consumed my days and often my nights. I didn't mind. Each success story fueled me more than sleep ever could. A pattern emerged in our cases that troubled me deeply. Many financial predators faced minimal consequences despite causing massive harm. They paid settlements using insurance policies designed for exactly this purpose. They moved on to new victims with disturbing ease. I started documenting these systemic failures. The research became a comprehensive report by the 4th year. We published it online with detailed recommendations for legal reforms. The report caught the attention of a state senator with a background in consumer protection. Her office reached out to discuss potential legislation. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. I prepared for days, rehearsing key points and statistics. The senator was impressed by our data and personal stories. She invited me to testify at an upcoming committee hearing. Public speaking had always terrified me. I said yes anyway. The hearing was scheduled 6 weeks out. I prepared meticulously for my 5 minutes of testimony. I practiced in front of Maria until she could recite it with me. The day arrived with stomach-churning intensity. The committee room was smaller than I had imagined. 8 legislators sat behind a curved desk. I took my seat at the witness table. The microphone seemed unnecessarily intimidating. My testimony flowed better than in any practice session. The statistics and stories connected in ways I hadn't planned. Questions followed from 3 committee members. I answered clearly despite my racing heart. The committee chair thanked me for my insights. The proposed bill moved forward with amendments reflecting our recommendations. It passed the following session with bipartisan support. The governor signed it on a Thursday morning. I was invited to the ceremony but couldn't attend due to a client emergency. The new law created stronger penalties for financial fraud involving intimate partners. It established better restitution mechanisms for victims. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Our caseload doubled after the legislation passed. We hired 3 more staff members using grant funding. Our office expanded from 1 room to a small suite. I finally bought myself a proper desk, not secondhand this time. The organization's 5th anniversary approached with surprising speed. We planned a modest celebration with clients and supporters. The event was scheduled at a community center we had helped save from a predatory loan scheme. Decorations were minimal but meaningful. Success stories printed on large posters lined the walls. The room filled quickly with people whose lives had intersected with ours. Former clients now volunteered as mentors. Lawyers who had taken cases pro bono mingled with forensic accountants. Local officials who had championed our cause stopped by with congratulations. I prepared brief remarks but found myself overwhelmed when approaching the microphone. 5 years of emotions crashed together in my chest. I breathed deeply and began anyway. I told my story one more time but focused on what came after. The rebuilding, the purpose, the community we had created together. The applause that followed wasn't for me. It was for everyone in that room who had refused to remain a victim. The celebration continued well into the evening. I slipped away after most speeches were done. The cool night air felt cleansing somehow. I walked 6 blocks to a small park and sat on a bench. Stars peeked through the city's light pollution. I realized I hadn't looked up in months. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I almost ignored it until I saw Mason's name in the headline. He had been indicted on 38 counts of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The cases were unrelated to mine but followed the exact same patterns. Federal prosecutors had built their case over 2 years of investigation. The article mentioned 3 other victims who had come forward after finding resources through PFRN. I sat perfectly still for several minutes. No tears came, no anger surfaced, just a profound sense of completion washed over me. Justice wasn't just about my case anymore. It was about changing the system that had protected him and others like him. I walked back to the celebration with renewed purpose. The next morning brought a flood of media requests. News outlets wanted comments on Mason's indictment and our connection to the case. I declined most interviews but agreed to one with a respected financial journal. The reporter asked thoughtful questions about systemic issues rather than salacious details. The resulting article generated our largest donation to date. We used the funds to launch an education program targeting college students. Financial literacy became our secondary mission. Prevention seemed as important as recovery. We created workshops for identifying financial red flags in relationships. Universities began requesting our presentations for orientation programs. I trained 4 staff members to deliver the curriculum when demand exceeded my availability. The work evolved in ways I never anticipated. We expanded into research partnerships with law schools. Data from our cases informed academic papers on financial abuse patterns. I co-authored 3 studies that influenced regulatory changes in banking oversight. Mason's trial began during our 6th year of operation. I attended the opening arguments out of curiosity rather than vengeance. He looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than the man who had once controlled every aspect of my life. His defense team presented weak explanations for documented fraud. The prosecution methodically dismantled each excuse with evidence remarkably similar to what I had gathered years earlier. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours, guilty on 32 counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. I didn't attend. The outcome didn't matter as much as I thought it would. He received 12 years in federal prison. The news barely registered emotionally. I had moved beyond needing his punishment for closure. His victims were my focus now. We helped 3 of them recover assets he had hidden in offshore accounts. The process took months of forensic accounting and legal maneuvering. The victory celebration was sweeter than any I had experienced personally. PFRN expanded into 3 new states that year. We established satellite offices with local partners. Our model proved adaptable to different legal jurisdictions. I traveled frequently to train new teams and establish protocols. The work remained challenging but fulfilling in ways I couldn't have imagined on that bathroom floor years earlier. My personal life slowly reemerged from the shadow of my mission. I started dating again after nearly 7 years of self-imposed solitude. Nothing serious at first, just coffee meetings and occasional dinners. I approached relationships with caution and new awareness. Red flags that I once would have ignored now stood out like emergency flares. I met Daniel at a financial crimes conference in Denver. He ran a cybersecurity firm specializing in identity protection. Our conversation started professionally and evolved naturally. He asked thoughtful questions about my work without prying into my personal history. We exchanged business cards and LinkedIn profiles. He emailed 3 days later with information on a security protocol our organization might find useful. No pressure, no expectations, just genuine professional courtesy. Our professional relationship developed over 6 months before he asked me to dinner. I accepted after careful consideration. The evening was refreshingly normal. He talked about growing up in Minnesota. I shared stories about my college years. Neither of us mentioned work for the first 2 hours. We dated slowly by modern standards. Monthly dinners became bi-weekly. Phone calls became regular but never intrusive. He respected boundaries I hadn't even needed to verbalize. 8 months into our relationship, I finally shared my full story. We sat on his balcony on a clear summer night. The telling took nearly 3 hours. He listened without interruption, asked clarifying questions only when I paused, offered no judgment or excessive sympathy, just understanding and presence. Our relationship deepened after that night. Trust came easier than I expected. We moved in together after 18 months of dating. His house became our home with minimal adjustment. He cleared half his office for my work needs. I made space in my schedule for actual weekends again. PFRN continued growing under stronger leadership distribution. I promoted Maria to operations director in our 8th year. She had earned the position through tireless dedication and innovative program development. The organization no longer depended solely on my daily presence. This structural change allowed me to focus on strategic initiatives and policy work. We launched a legislative advocacy arm focused on financial abuse laws. I testified before congressional committees twice that year. Federal lawmakers began considering our model legislation for national implementation. The work remained challenging but increasingly impactful. Our 9th anniversary approached with significant momentum. We had helped recover over $70 million for victims across 17 states. More importantly, we had helped change laws in 11 jurisdictions. Prevention programs reached over 20,000 college students annually. Our research partnerships produced actionable data for regulatory reforms. The organization had outgrown its origin story. It now belonged to the hundreds of survivors who contributed their experiences and expertise. I began planning a leadership transition for our 10th year. The decision wasn't about stepping away, but evolving my role. The organization needed different skills for its next phase of growth. I identified 3 potential candidates from within our team. The succession planning took 6 months of careful discussion and assessment. The board unanimously approved Keisha Johnson as the next executive director. She had joined us as a client 4 years earlier and risen to become our most effective advocate. Her financial background and personal experience made her uniquely qualified. The transition announcement generated unexpected media interest. Several major publications requested interviews about our first decade of work. The resulting stories focused less on my personal journey and more on the systemic changes we had achieved together. This shift in narrative felt like the ultimate success. My wedding to Daniel happened quietly the same month as the leadership transition. We invited 30 close friends to a ceremony in his backyard. Maria served as my maid of honor. The celebration was simple and joyful. Mason crossed my mind only once during the day. The thought was fleeting and held no power. Daniel and I honeymooned in Portugal for 2 weeks. The trip marked my first true vacation in nearly a decade. I checked email only once every 3 days. The organization continued functioning perfectly in my absence. This reality was both humbling and liberating. We returned home to news that the Federal Financial Abuse Prevention Act had passed with provisions drafted by our legal team. The legislation created new protections for victims and accountability for perpetrators. Keisha had testified brilliantly at the final committee hearing. My role had become obsolete in the best possible way. I transitioned to board chair the following month. The position allowed me to provide governance oversight while stepping back from daily operations. Keisha implemented several innovations I had never considered. The organization flourished under her leadership. Expansion continued into 5 additional states. Our 10th anniversary celebration was held at a downtown convention center. Over 400 people attended. Former clients, staff, volunteers, and supporters filled the room with palpable energy. The success stories covered an entire wall in captioned photographs. Thousands more had been helped without ever having their pictures taken. I delivered brief remarks focusing on the future rather than the past. The standing ovation wasn't for me, but for what we had built together. As I looked across the room, I realized something profound had shifted. The organization no longer needed my pain as its foundation. It had transformed into something self-sustaining and ever-evolving. My personal healing had completed alongside this transformation. The vengeance that once drove me had been replaced by something far more powerful: systemic change. I returned to my table where Daniel waited with a supportive smile. Maria raised her glass in a silent toast. Keisha commanded the room with natural authority as she outlined our vision for the next decade. The future stretched before us with possibilities I couldn't have imagined from that bathroom floor 10 years earlier. I hadn't just reclaimed my power and money. I had discovered how to transform personal tragedy into collective progress. That night, surrounded by hundreds of lives touched by our work, I finally understood. Mason hadn't taken everything from me. He had unwittingly given me the perspective to see what truly mattered. The organization would continue its mission long after my story became a footnote in its history. The wedding gift I treasured wasn't about justice for one person. It was about creating justice for thousands. That journey from victim to survivor to advocate had been worth every painful step. And as I looked toward the future, I knew the most important chapters were yet to be written. I set down my pen and closed the journal, letting out a deep breath. The pages contained my whole journey, every painful detail meticulously documented. I glanced at my watch, 3:47 a.m. Sleep wasn't coming tonight, not with tomorrow looming ahead. The congressional hearing would start at 9 sharp. My testimony was scheduled for 11. I had practiced my statement dozens of times already. My hands still trembled when I thought about facing those senators. The trembling didn't bother me anymore. I accepted it as part of who I'd become. I stood up and walked to the hotel window, pulling back the heavy curtain. Washington, D.C. sparkled below, monuments illuminated against the night sky. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. My reflection stared back, tired eyes and new gray hairs I hadn't noticed before. The woman looking back seemed both familiar and strange. I let the curtain fall closed and grabbed my phone. 3 missed calls from Sarah. She was probably worried sick. I shot her a quick text. Still awake, nervous but ready. Her reply came seconds later. "You've got this. We all believe in you." I smiled despite my anxiety. The organization had become my family over these past 5 years. I returned to the small desk and opened my laptop. The faces of our newest survivors appeared on screen, their stories cataloged in our database. Each one drove me forward. Each one justified all the sleepless nights I I clicked through their profiles, committing details to memory. These weren't just cases. They were people with dreams that Mason and men like him had tried to shatter. I closed the laptop and paced the room. My testimony needed to honor their experiences. The hotel room felt increasingly claustrophobic. I grabbed my keycard and headed for the door. The hallway was silent at this hour. I took the elevator to the lobby, nodded at the night clerk. The man barely looked up from his magazine. I pushed through the revolving door into the humid summer night. The air felt thick in my lungs. I began walking with no destination in mind. My footsteps echoed on the empty sidewalk. The Capitol building loomed in the distance, illuminated and imposing. In just a few hours, I would walk up those steps. I would enter those hallowed halls. I would tell my story to people with the power to change things. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. Get some sleep, boss. I smiled at her motherly tone. Sarah had been there from the beginning, had helped build our survivor network from nothing. I turned back toward the hotel, suddenly aware of my exhaustion. Sleep might actually come now. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight through the gap in the curtains. I blinked awake, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling. Reality rushed back quickly. Today was the day. I showered and dressed with deliberate care. The navy blue suit was new, purchased specifically for this appearance. I applied minimal makeup, just enough to hide the dark circles. The woman in the mirror looked professional, composed, determined. I barely recognized myself. The organization had arranged a car service. The driver remained silent during our journey to Capitol Hill. I was grateful for the quiet. I reviewed my notes one last time. The car pulled to a stop at the designated entrance. Cameras flashed immediately. I hadn't expected the media presence so early. Sarah appeared at my side, materializing from the crowd. Her arm linked with mine as we climbed the steps. Remember to breathe, she whispered. We passed through security without incident. The hearing room buzzed with activity. Staffers rushed about with important-looking folders. Journalists jockeyed for position. I was directed to a small waiting room. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-looking men from another era. Time moved strangely as I waited. Minutes stretched like hours. Then suddenly a young aide appeared at the door. They're ready for you now. The walk to the witness table felt like walking underwater. Faces blurred in my peripheral vision. The chairman's gavel struck loudly. The room fell silent. I adjusted the microphone and began my testimony. The words came easier than expected. I described the organization's work without emotion. I presented our data methodically. The numbers spoke for themselves. 5,000 survivors helped in 5 years. 300 perpetrators held accountable. 76 policy changes across 14 states. The senators asked predictable questions. I answered each one directly. No embellishment, no dramatization. Just facts. Just truth. Senator Hawkins leaned forward when I finished. And what about your personal experience, Ms. Chen? The room grew impossibly quiet. I had prepared for this moment. My personal experience informed our methodology, Senator, but today I'm here representing thousands of survivors. The senator nodded, seemingly satisfied. I had successfully redirected. My personal story wasn't the point anymore. The hearing concluded after 3 hours. I gathered my materials with steady hands. Sarah appeared at my side again. You were magnificent, she said. We exited through a side door, avoiding the press. The car waited exactly where promised. I collapsed into the back seat, suddenly drained. Sarah handed me a bottle of water. The funding bill passed committee, she said. It's headed to the floor vote next week. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. The hotel bar seemed like the appropriate place to decompress. I ordered scotch. Neat. Sarah chose white wine. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Mason's lawyer called again. Sarah finally said. I stared into my glass. What did he want this time? Sarah sighed. Same deal. He drops the appeal if you drop the civil suit. I shook my head. Not happening. Mason's 10-year sentence had been hard won. His legal team had fought viciously. His wealth had nearly bought his freedom. Nearly. The civil suit was about more than money. It was about precedent. The hotel room felt less oppressive with one victory behind me. I kicked off my shoes and changed into comfortable clothes. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. The organization's board members, other survivors, even my mother, who had finally started to understand my mission. I ordered room service and opened my laptop. Work never stopped, not even on milestone days. New cases needed review. Staff needed direction. Funding needed allocation. I worked until my eyes burned. Sleep came easily that night. The morning brought a different energy. I packed quickly and checked out early. The flight back to Chicago departed at noon. I had built our headquarters there deliberately, away from coastal power centers, centered in America's heartland. The organization needed to reach everyone, not just those in privileged zip codes. The airport hummed with activity. I navigated security efficiently. My phone rang as I reached the gate. The display showed a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Is this Amelia Chen? A woman's voice asked. I confirmed my identity. This is Detective Rodriguez from Denver PD. Your organization was recommended by the DA's office. I signaled to the gate agent that I needed a moment. The detective explained her situation quickly. 6 new victims had come forward. The perpetrator was a wealthy real estate developer. Local resources were limited. Could we help? I promised to call back within the hour. This was why we existed. This was the purpose that had emerged from my pain. The flight passed quickly as I reviewed the Denver case files. The pattern was familiar. A powerful man, multiple victims, institutional protection. By the time we landed in Chicago, I had drafted a response plan. Our office occupied the entire 5th floor of a converted warehouse. The space was intentionally welcoming. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, living plants everywhere. I walked through the main work area, greeting staff members by name. Their energy was infectious, their dedication humbling. My office overlooked the river. I dropped my bag and sat heavily in my chair. The wall opposite my desk displayed framed legislation. Each document represented lives changed, each signature a step toward justice. I opened my laptop and began writing the Denver response plan. Our organization would send 3 advocates. They would coordinate with local authorities. They would support the victims through every stage. They would ensure resources reached those who needed them most. I worked through lunch, barely noticing the hours passing. My assistant knocked softly around 4. The board meeting starts in 15 minutes, she reminded me. I thanked her and gathered my presentation materials. The conference room filled quickly with board members both in person and on screen. I presented our quarterly results confidently. The metrics were impressive. Growth continued on all fronts. Funding remained stable. Our influence expanded steadily. Questions came rapid fire after my presentation. I answered each one thoroughly. The board had always respected my expertise. They had backed my vision from the beginning. The meeting concluded with unanimous approval for the Denver intervention. I returned to my office as evening fell over the city. The river reflected orange and purple from the setting sun. I allowed myself a moment of stillness. 5 years of building, 5 years of fighting, 5 years of transforming pain into purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother. Saw you on the news. Mom cried. Proud of you. I smiled at his simple message. Family had been complicated after everything happened. They hadn't understood my choices initially. Time had healed some wounds. Others remained tender. I gathered my things and headed for the elevator. My apartment was 20 minutes from the office. The commute gave me time to decompress. The city lights blurred as I drove. Chicago had become home in ways I hadn't anticipated. My building's doorman greeted me warmly. Package came for you, Ms. Chen. He handed me a heavy envelope. No return address. I thanked him and continued to the elevator. My apartment welcomed me with familiar silence. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. The envelope felt ominous in my hand. I opened it carefully. Inside was a newspaper. The headline announced Mason's appeal had been denied. A note was paper-clipped to the page. Justice prevails. Keep fighting. Judge Jefferson had presided over Mason's original trial. Her support had remained unwavering. I placed the newspaper on my kitchen counter. A small victory worth celebrating. I opened a bottle of wine and stepped onto my small balcony. The city sprawled before me. Millions of lives intersecting. Somewhere out there were more survivors who hadn't found their voices yet. More perpetrators who thought themselves untouchable. More institutions enabling abuse through silence. My work would never truly end. Morning came with renewed purpose. I arrived at the office early. The Denver team needed final briefing before departure. I gathered them in my office, reviewing strategies and resources. These 3 women had all been where those Denver victims now stood. They understood the journey ahead. I watched them board their flight via the airport's security feed. Our organization had allies everywhere. Technology had become our greatest asset. I returned to my desk and opened the legislative tracking system. 17 bills across 12 states, each one addressing some aspect of survivor justice, each one needing support, testimony, data. I assigned staff to each priority item. The system we'd built worked efficiently now. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Ms. Chen, this is Congressman Wallace's office. The voice sounded young, probably a staff assistant. The congressman would like to meet next week about the SAFE Act. I checked my calendar quickly. I can be in Washington on Wednesday. The assistant confirmed the appointment and hung up. The SAFE Act represented our most ambitious legislative goal yet. Comprehensive reform at the federal level. 2 years of our drafting. Countless revisions. Powerful opposition. I texted Sarah immediately. Wallace wants to meet. Wednesday in DC. Her response came quickly. I'll book your flight. The week passed in a blur of activity. The Denver team reported significant progress. Local authorities had welcomed our resources. Victims were receiving proper support. The perpetrator's legal team was already showing cracks. Tuesday evening found me on another plane. Washington never got easier to visit. The city held too many difficult memories. My hotel room overlooked the same view as before. The monuments, the history, the power. I unpacked methodically, hanging tomorrow's suit carefully. The SAFE Act briefing materials covered my bed. I reviewed each page, committing key points to memory. Sleep came fitfully that night. Dreams of Mason intruded despite the years between us. His face morphed into other faces, other perpetrators, other men who had taken what wasn't theirs to take. I woke before dawn, resigned to starting the day early. Congressman Wallace's office occupied a corner of the Longworth building. His chief of staff greeted me personally. The congressman is running late. Please make yourself comfortable. I sat in the reception area, observing the staff's movements. Young people moved with purpose. Phones rang constantly. Democracy in action looked like organized chaos. Wallace arrived 40 minutes late, apologizing profusely. Committee vote ran long. You know how it goes. I followed him into his private office. The space felt designed to impress. Photos with presidents past and present. Military memorabilia. Family portraits displaying perfect teeth. Wallace gestured to a sitting area. I've read your proposal. Ambitious. I nodded, waiting for more. Implementation costs are significant, he continued, but your data makes a compelling case. I outlined the key provisions methodically. Expanded resources for survivors, accountability measures for institutions, training requirements for law enforcement, research funding for prevention. Wallace listened without interruption. The opposition says it creates unreasonable burdens, he finally said. I was prepared for this argument. The current burden falls entirely on survivors, Congressman. I presented our economic impact study. The costs of doing nothing far outweighed implementation expenses. Wallace studied the numbers carefully. I can get you 10 minutes in front of the caucus next month. It wasn't everything we wanted. It was more than we had yesterday. I accepted graciously. The meeting concluded with practiced handshakes. Wallace's staff assistant escorted me out. He likes you, she whispered. He doesn't usually give that much time. I thanked her for the insight. Small victories accumulated day by day. My flight home departed that evening. I spent the intervening hours meeting with other legislative allies. Each conversation added another thread to our network. Each relationship strengthened our foundation. The plane lifted off as darkness fell over the Capitol. I watched the monuments recede below. Progress felt painfully slow sometimes. Other days, like today, I could see how far we'd come. Chicago welcomed me with a sudden downpour. I navigated from airport to apartment in the deluge. Water dripped from my hair as I unlocked my door. Home felt increasingly important as the work expanded. This space remained mine alone. Safe, controlled, healing. I checked messages while changing into dry clothes. The Denver team reported more victories. 3 additional victims had come forward. The prosecutor had added charges. Local media had begun coverage. I sent congratulatory texts to each team member. Their work embodied our mission perfectly. Sleep came easier that night. Dreams stayed mercifully vague. Morning arrived with sunshine and renewed energy. I dressed casually for Friday at the office. Our workplace culture intentionally balanced intensity with humanity. Self-care wasn't just permitted, it was required. I arrived to find the team assembled in our common area. Sarah stood at the center, grinning widely. The Denver DA just announced additional charges. 16 counts total now. Applause Applause erupted spontaneously. Small victories deserved celebration. The energy carried throughout the day. Staff moved with extra purpose. Phone calls felt more productive. Even routine paperwork seemed less tedious. I left the office at a reasonable hour. The weekend ahead promised rare downtime. My brother had invited me to his daughter's birthday party. Family connections had slowly mended over time. His children knew me only as their aunt who helped people. They didn't know the before. They didn't need to. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I drove to the suburbs with windows down. Music played loudly from my speakers. Simple pleasures had taken years to reclaim. My niece greeted me with enthusiastic hugs. "Aunt Mia, did you bring presents?" I laughed at her directness. Of course I did. The party swirled around me. Children played games in the backyard. Parents chatted in comfortable clusters. My brother manned the grill with practiced confidence. I helped his wife arrange food on colorful plates. This normal scene had once seemed impossibly distant. My phone stayed silenced in my purse. Work could wait for a few hours. My niece opened gifts with dramatic flair. My contribution, books about remarkable women throughout history, received appropriate appreciation. Cake was served, candles were blown out, wishes were made. I watched it all with quiet contentment. Family had its own kind of healing power. Sunday brought necessary work despite weekend intentions. The Denver situation had escalated further. New victims continued coming forward. Media coverage had intensified. Our team needed additional support. I coordinated resources from my home office. Staff volunteered without hesitation. Schedules were adjusted. Travel was arranged. The organization functioned like a well-oiled machine now. Monday arrived with unexpected developments. Mason's civil appeal had been denied. His financial penalties would stand. His assets would remain frozen. His victims would receive their settlements. I received the news via email from our legal team. No emotion showed on my face as I read the details. Colleagues might have expected celebration. I felt only quiet resolution. 5 years of legal battles had finally ended. Justice had prevailed, however imperfectly. I closed the email and continued with my day. The Denver team requested a video conference. I connected from my office. Their faces appeared on screen, tired but determined. "We need extraction for 2 of the victims," the team leader explained. Their families had turned against them. Their safety was compromised. I authorized emergency relocation funds immediately. Our safe house network activated within the hour. By evening, both survivors were in secure locations. Tuesday brought another congressional call. Wallace's office requested additional data before the caucus presentation. I assigned our research team to compile what was needed. The SAFE Act remained our highest legislative priority. Each request received immediate attention. The week continued its relentless pace. Denver developments dominated our morning briefings. Legislative progress required afternoon attention. New cases arrived daily, each demanding assessment and resources. I worked late most evenings. The mission consumed most waking hours. Few people understood the compulsion that drove me. Sarah entered my office Thursday evening. "You need to go home," she said firmly. "It's nearly 9. I looked up from my computer screen. Time had disappeared again. "I'll finish this report first." Sarah shook her head. "The report will be there tomorrow." Her concern was genuine. Her persistence matched my own. I relented and packed my bag. The drive home felt surprisingly refreshing. City lights sparkled against the night sky. My apartment welcomed me with familiar silence. I dropped my keys in their usual bowl. A small envelope had been slipped under my door. My name was written in unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a simple card. "5 years ago, you helped me find my voice. Today, I used it to testify against my abuser. Thank you for showing me the way forward." It was signed simply, Rebecca. I didn't immediately place the name. Our organization had helped so many over the years. I searched our database from my phone. Rebecca Torres. Case number 2473, corporate executive harassment. Settlement reached 3 years ago. I remembered her case then. She had been terrified of public exposure. We had secured a confidential resolution. Now she had found courage to speak publicly. These moments sustained me through the hardest days. These reminders that healing continued long after our direct involvement ended. These proof points that our work mattered in tangible ways. I placed the card on my bedside table. Sleep came easily that night. Morning arrived with renewed purpose. I dressed with particular care. Today marked 5 years exactly since the organization's founding. No formal celebration had been planned. The milestone felt significant nonetheless. The office hummed with typical Friday energy. Staff moved between projects with practiced efficiency. I observed their work with profound gratitude. These people had committed themselves to our shared mission. These colleagues had become family in many ways. My assistant appeared at my office door. "Package for you." She handed me a small box. No sender information appeared on the label. I opened it cautiously, mindful of security protocols. Inside lay a simple silver bracelet. A card beneath it read, "For transforming your pain into purpose. For showing others the way forward. From those who walk the path you cleared." It was signed by our entire staff. Tears threatened unexpectedly. I rarely allowed emotion to surface at work. This gesture broke through carefully, maintained barriers. Sarah appeared in my doorway. We couldn't let today pass unmarked. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist. "Thank you for everything." The words felt insufficient. The day continued with unusual warmth. Staff stopped by my office more frequently. Small conversations carried deeper meaning. The organization had evolved beyond my original vision. It had become something stronger, more resilient. The weekend arrived with blessed timing. I needed space to process the emotions of the milestone. 5 years of building something meaningful from devastation. 5 years of reclaiming power that Mason had tried to take. 5 years of watching survivors become advocates. I spent Saturday in quiet reflection. The lakefront path provided perfect walking space. Miles passed beneath my feet as I considered the journey. From victim to survivor. From survivor to advocate. From advocate to leader. The transformation hadn't been linear. Progress came unevenly, often painfully. Sunday brought unexpected news. A major foundation had selected our organization for their annual award. The recognition included substantial funding. The email contained congratulations and logistics. The ceremony would occur next month in New York. I forwarded the information to our development team. Their excited responses filled my inbox immediately. External validation wasn't our primary goal. Financial support certainly helped our mission. Monday morning found me energized by possibilities. The foundation award would fund our expansion plans. New regions could receive services sooner than projected. More survivors would find support when needed most. I gathered the leadership team to share the news officially. Their reactions ranged from tears to cheers. 5 years of dedicated work was receiving deserved recognition. The day passed in strategic planning. The week continued our relentless pace. Denver developments required ongoing attention. Legislative efforts faced unexpected obstacles. New cases arrived with heartbreaking regularity. The work never ended. The need never diminished. I maintained the schedule with practiced discipline. Early mornings, late evenings, brief breaks for necessary sustenance. My body had adjusted to this rhythm years ago. Thursday brought another development. Congressman Wallace requested my testimony before his full committee. The SAFE Act had gained unexpected momentum. Opposition had weakened after recent high-profile cases. Our window of opportunity had suddenly widened. I rearranged my schedule immediately. Legislative victories required flexibility and immediate response. The flight to Washington was becoming too familiar. I recognized flight attendants by name now. The Capitol no longer triggered the same painful memories. Time had created necessary distance. The committee hearing room looked smaller than imagined. Rows of chairs faced the elevated committee table. Staffers moved importantly between members. Journalists settled into designated areas. I took my seat at the witness table. My testimony had been prepared for weeks, regularly updated as needed. The chairman called the session to order. Members made obligatory opening statements. My panel was introduced with formal courtesy. I delivered my testimony without referring to notes, numbers, data, research, impact. The evidence supporting the SAFE Act was overwhelming. Committee questions followed predictable patterns. Supporters sought elaboration on benefits. Opponents focused on costs and implementation. I answered each query with practiced precision. The hearing concluded after 3 hours. Several members approached afterward with private encouragements. "We're close on this one," Wallace whispered. "Closer than you might think." I thanked him for his support. Washington's political theater required patient navigation. My return flight departed that evening. I watched the Capitol recede below once again. Progress continued its incremental pace. Change happened through persistent pressure. Justice advanced through relentless advocacy. Chicago welcomed me with clear skies and moderate temperatures. My apartment felt increasingly like sanctuary. The space contained no memories of Mason, no echoes of past trauma. Only the present and future existed here. Friday brought the Denver team home. Their intervention had successfully concluded. 16 victims had received justice and support. The perpetrator faced decades in prison. Local resources had been properly trained. I greeted the team personally at the airport. Their exhausted faces showed both triumph and cost. This work demanded everything and returned immeasurable value. The weekend arrived with welcome timing. I slept late for the first time in months. My body needed recovery. After weeks of intensity, the foundation award ceremony approached quickly. Preparations required attention. My speech needed careful consideration. The organization's story deserved proper telling. I worked on drafts throughout Saturday. Words came easily when describing our mission. The journey from personal trauma to collective action. The transformation of pain into purpose. The future still waiting to be built. Sunday evening found me satisfied with the final version. The speech balanced personal and professional appropriately. It honored those we served without exploiting their stories. It celebrated progress while acknowledging work still needed. Monday morning brought unexpected news. Mason had died in prison. Apparent heart attack. No suspicious circumstances. The email from our legal team contained just the basic facts. I sat motionless at my desk. The information produced no immediate emotion. This man who had once dominated my existence had exited the world. His death changed nothing about our work. Justice had already been secured through legal channels. His victims had already received their settlements. His name had already faded from public consciousness. I closed the email without responding. Life continued its forward momentum. The foundation ceremony approached rapidly. Travel arrangements were confirmed. Speech was finalized. Professional attire was selected. My team would attend in full support. New York welcomed us with typical hustle. Our hotel overlooked Central Park. The team gathered in the lobby, excitement evident. This recognition validated their countless sacrifices. The ceremony venue sparkled with elegant lighting. Notable figures from philanthropic circles mingled casually. We entered as a unified group. The organization had truly become something beyond my original vision. The program proceeded with practiced timing. Previous award recipients spoke briefly. Foundation directors explained selection criteria. Finally, our organization's name was announced. I approached the podium amid genuine applause. My prepared remarks waited on the lectern. I looked out at the assembled audience. Wealthy donors, policymakers, media representatives. My gaze found my team's supportive faces. These people who had built something remarkable from tragedy. These colleagues who had become family through shared purpose. I began speaking with clear conviction. 5 years ago, I was defined by what had been taken from me. The room fell completely silent. Today, we are defined by what we've built together. The speech continued for exactly 7 minutes. My words traced our journey with appropriate humility. The foundation president presented the award afterward. A simple crystal sculpture representing transformation. The physical object mattered less than what it represented. Recognition, validation, support for continued growth. The evening concluded with networking and congratulations. My team navigated the room with practiced professionalism. These people had become advocates in their own right. These colleagues carried our mission forward daily. The hotel bar seemed the appropriate place for team celebration. Glasses were raised in sincere toast. Stories were shared with comfortable familiarity. Laughter came easily after years of shared purpose. I observed the scene with quiet satisfaction. The organization would indeed continue long after my story became footnote. The future chapters remained unwritten but full of promise. Mason hadn't taken everything from me after all. He had inadvertently launched something far more powerful than he could have imagined. My journey from victim to survivor to advocate continued evolving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More survivors would need support. More perpetrators would require accountability. More institutions would need transformation. The work continued without endpoint. The mission expanded with each passing year, and I remained ready for whatever came next.